which is the lunar testbed. Why the moon is our ethics sandbox for interplanetary innovation. I think I will call you Lars Jones. I don't dare to pronounce your last name. And you are certified innovation manager and interdisciplinary strategist. Interdisciplinary, no, sorry, in American Studies, Business Administration, and MBA in Computer Science and Applied Ethics. So, please.
Thank you, Niklas. Let me check if I can share my screen here.
Yes, we need probably to get no, that worked.
Is it working?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Well, hi everyone, and thank you for joining me today. It's a real pleasure to be part of the Lunar Development Conference. And I'd like to give a big thank you to the organizers for bringing us all together. So, well, let's get right at it. So we are living through one of the most exciting moments in space history. In many ways, we already laying the foundations literally and figuratively for sustained human presence beyond Earth. And the moon, well, the moon is becoming more than just a goal, it's becoming a test bed. But here's the thing. When we talk about lunar development, the focus is usually on the technical side. Launch systems, regolith, radiation shielding, habitat engineering, all absolutely crucial. What I'd like to do today is add another layer to that conversation, one that's often overlooked, but in my view, just as essential. What kind of systems are we actually building up there, and what do they say about us? This talk will explore the idea that the moon isn't just a launch pad or a waypoint. It's a mirror, and maybe even more importantly, it's a second chance. So together we are going to look at the moon as kind of sandbox, not just for engineering and logistics, but for ethics, governance, and what I call future-proofed design. I'll be sharing some case studies, a few lessons from speculative fiction, and a framework for what I call ethical prototyping. I promise this won't be a philosophy lecture, it's a systems talk. But it's a talk about systems with values built in. And in a moment we are building the blueprint for interplanetary life that might be the most important blueprint of all. So let's dive in. Let's see, where's my next slide? Okay, here we go.
I'm seeing the last presenter slides. I'm not seeing your slides. Is anybody else?
Okay. I mean, I'm
seeing why the moon, why now?
Yeah, that's my slide. That's my slide.
Okay? Is okay?
Yes, it's good now. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. I am so sorry. Sorry.
I think sometimes there are lags.
Okay, so if you are good, I can continue.
Yes.
So let's start by zooming out just a little. Why the moon and why now? Well, first of all, the moon is no longer science fiction. We are well beyond the concept art and speculative timelines. NASA's Artemis program, China's lunar plans, private sector efforts. We are talking real roadmaps, real hardware, real budgets. The moon is becoming operational, but it's also a very unique kind of space. It's close enough that we can maintain some connection with Earth. Roughly a 1.3 second communication delay. However, that's nothing compared to Mars. And yet it's far enough away that systems need to function independently, especially in emergencies. In other words, it's the perfect middle ground, a kind of, well, call it partial autonomy zone, where we can build, break, and iterate. The stakes are most certainly high, because the failure, whether technical or social, is huge. But that also means the opportunity is huge. If we treat the moon not just as an outpost, but as let's call it a rehearsal space for civilization building. We can use it to prototype not only systems, but values. Because here's the thing, what we build on the moon won't stay on the moon. The structures, protocols, and assumptions we put into place will travel with us to Mars, to orbitals, to wherever we go next. So the moon isn't just our next step, it's our foundation, and foundations matter. Now, let's talk about a central metaphor that frames this entire presentation, and it's a simple one, but it carries a lot of weight. The moon is a sandbox. Don't laugh. I can hear you laughing even with the microphones muted. I know it's sand. Seriously, but by that, I don't just mean it's barren and dusty, although it is. I mean, the moon is a controlled testing environment, just like a software sandbox. It's isolated, it's contained, it's observable, but unlike a simulation or lab back on Earth, it has real variables, real complexity, real risk, and that makes it uniquely valuable, not just for engineering and hardware testing, but for something even harder to simulate, systems of co-living. Think about it. When we build a habitat on the moon, we are not just sending gear, we are sending assumptions about leadership, about safety, about how decisions are made when lives are on the line. So what if we use this environment not just to prototype machines, but to prototype society? What if the moon could be a sandbox not just for tech, but for ethics, for governance, for cultural resilience? That's what this presentation is about, not lunar dust, not mining logistics, but the human layer, the invisible systems that once they're embedded are incredibly hard to undo. The moon is our chance to get those things right before we scale them to Mars and even beyond. So let's talk about failure. Not the kind that ends missions, but the kind that teaches us something before that happens. Because the reality is systems fail. They always do. Whether it's a software glitch, a breakdown in communication, or misjudgment in leadership dynamics. Every complex system has pressure points. The real question is, where do we let it fail and when? And that's where the moon comes in. Think of the moon as a controlled burn zone, that kind of place where it's safe to stress test fragile systems, where we can observe failure without catastrophic fallout. You want to see what happens when a team fractures under psychological strain. Test it on the moon. Want to know if your governance structure holds when the oxygen runs low. Test it on the moon. Because if those things break on Mars, or even far out of there, it's a very, very long way home. So the moon gives us something incredible, precious, real-world complexity with low latency feedback. It's not failure we should fear, it's failing too late in the wrong place with no margin for correction. If we can learn to fail wisely and early, we stand a better chance of building space systems that don't just survive, but rather adapt. So we've talked about failure and why the moon is the right place to explore it. But we need to take this further, because it's not just about what breaks, it's about what values get revealed when things break. And that brings us to a concept I call ethical prototyping. Now, we are all familiar with prototyping in the engineering sense. Build it, test it, tweak it. But what if we applied the same iterative thinking to ethics? What if we treated fairness, human dignity, and social cohesion not just as afterthoughts, but as core system feature to be tested, stressed, and refined, just like power systems are comlinks? That's what ethical prototyping does. It treats values as a design parameter. So instead of asking, does the system work? We ask, does it work fairly? Does it reinforce resilience over rigidity? Can it adapt to unforeseen crises, or does it collapse under pressure? And the moon gives us the space, literally, to do this kind of testing. In a way, it's our first real opportunity to intentionally designed for ethics, not just compliance. Because if we wait until we are on Mars to ask those questions, it's already too late. That shift now from systems to structures, from ethical prototyping to the question of governance. Because, let's be honest, on the moon, the stakes are too high to not talk about power. Who makes decisions? How do we resolve conflict? Who's accountable if something goes wrong? Lunar settlements, at least early ones, will be small, tight-knit groups. We are talking maybe 6, 8, 10 people max. But here's the twist, smaller doesn't mean simpler. In fact, when you combine extreme isolation, limited resources, and complex tech dependencies, you need a governance system that's not just efficient, but resilient. Traditional top-down command structures may work well in emergencies, but for long-term habitability, we need systems that support shared agency, distributed leadership, and transparent decision-making. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why not just stick with what works? The military model, with a clear chain of command, is designed for exactly these kinds of high-stake environments. And yes, of course, in emergencies, top-down control is often essential. No debate there. But if we want to sustain life on the moon, not just survive it, we need systems that go beyond command and control, systems that adapt, that listen, and that follow for shared responsibility, because space isn't just a battlefield, it's a society in the making. Think of the moon as micro-political lab, a place where we can test models of cooperation and conflict resolution before we try them on Mars or in larger scale habitats. Can we build governance systems that are not only functional but fair, that maintain stability without sacrificing dignity? If we treat the moon as political sandbox, we get to ask and answer those questions in time. Because here's the thing, the politics we export to space will echo back to Earth. Let's make sure they are worth exporting. So let's talk about the idea of ethical prototyping, because this is where we shift from theory to actual practice. We are used to prototyping in engineering. You build, you test, you iterate, rinse and repeat. We all know that. But ethical prototyping, that means we don't just test for what works, we test for what matters. It's about asking, how does this system behave under stress? Not just physical stress, but social, moral, even psychological stress. We simulate failure modes, not just when a sensor breaks, but when a crew member loses trust in the AI decisions, or when a small team falls into unequal power dynamics, or when bias gets baked into life-critical systems and no one notices until it's too late. And we are not just talking about adding a, well, let's call it morality filter at the end. It's about designing from day one for fairness, dignity, resilience. And honestly, if we only test for performance under ideal conditions, we are not designing for space, we are designing for fantasy. Ethical prototyping is what turns fragile systems into survivable systems. And they are better to simulate those stress scenarios than on the moon. Well, all right, so why the moon? Why not just build all this on Earth or jump straight to Mars? Well, the moon gives us something unique, a sweet spot between risk and realism. It's close enough that we can respond quickly to problems, but far enough that we are no longer in the comfort zone. It's remote, but not unreachable. And that's exactly what makes it the perfect testbed. If something goes wrong, help is days away, not months. We still have two-way communication without the Mars-level time delay, which makes it easier to test AI-assisted decision-making without cutting humans out of the loop. Socially, it lets us simulate isolation, resource scarcity, team dynamics, and even conflict resolution under real pressure. Technically, it forces us to think about closed-loop systems, recycling, limited energy, and all the quirks of operating in low gravity. The moon is like a dress rehearsal, one where the audience is watching, but you can still tweak the script before opening night on Mars. It's the best shot we have at stress testing, not just our technologies, but our assumptions about civilization. Now, let's talk about the elephant on the moon, or more precisely, the algorithm. AI will play a central role in lunar operation. That's not up for debate. From managing life support systems to monitoring crew health, plotting safe routes, or optimizing resource use, AI will be everywhere. But here's the question, what role should it play? Are we designing AI as an assistant, as a partner, or intentionally or not, as the final authority? Because here's the danger. In high-stress situations, humans often defer to automation. It's called automation bias. We trust the system, even when it's wrong. That's not science fiction. That's been documented here on Earth, in aviation, in medicine, even in finance. And on the moon, with lives depending on complex interconnected systems, the stakes multiply. So we have to ask, how do we design AI that is transparent, that can explain its reasoning, and that allows for human override without confusion? The question is not about trusting machines. We are talking about building systems that deserve trust. We are not just engineering tools, we are designing relationships between humans and their synthetic teammates. And the moon gives us the ideal place to figure out what that relationship should look like. All right, now we're entering the AI zone. And here's the big question. Where does the decision-making power live? We all agree AI will be essential for lunar missions. From monitoring life support to managing energy systems to navigating emergencies in real time. But there's a fine line between AI as co-pilot and AI as authority. The more complex the mission, the more tempting it becomes to let algorithms take the wheel, especially in low latency environments where every second matters. But here's the danger. We start treating AI not as a tool, but as a kind of oracle, a black box we defer to because it knows better. And when that happens, we lose something critical. Human agency, human accountability, human dignity. We've already seen this play out in Earth-based systems, in policing, in hiring, in healthcare, systems that make decisions based on data, but without context, compassion, or consent. On the moon, the stakes are even higher. We can't afford to have systems that say, trust me, I run the numbers. We need systems that are transparent, auditable, and designed for oversight. Because when things go wrong in space, and they will, someone needs to be able to say, I understand what happened, and I take responsibility. The moon is our last safe place to get this right before we scale flawed decision-making models all the way to Mars. Let's pause for a moment and think about something we often overlook in space conversations. Infrastructure is not neutral. It may look technical, mechanical, objective, but under the hood it's deeply ideological. When we design a lunar habitat, a common protocol or a resource allocation algorithm, we are making value judgments about who decides about what gets prioritized, about how power flows through the system. Even algorithms, often framed as objective, are policy in disguise. They optimize for something. The question is, who decides what's being optimized? For example, are we designing for resilience or efficiency, for individual autonomy or group cohesion? Are decisions made collaboratively or delegated to software that no one fully understands? Because if we are not careful, we risk building systems that look impressive, but that log in values we'd never consciously choose. Values that reflect the biases of Earth-based institutions, not the needs of an off-world society. This is why ethical prototyping isn't about moral philosophy, it's about systems design. It's about asking, are we building tools that serve people, or are we creating systems that people are forced to serve? The moon gives us a chance to make that distinction before it's too late. All right, let's get into the really big question now. Can we actually cooperate off Earth, or are we just going to bring our baggage with us? On paper, the moon is nobody's property. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 prohibits national appropriation. That's great in theory. But reality is more complicated. We already see signs of geopolitical tension shaping lunar plans. The Artemis Accords, for instance, propose norms for space activity, but not everyone's on board. Russia and China are going their own route. India is rising fast. Private companies are launching their own ambitions. So here's the question. Are we about to recreate Earth-style geopolitics on the moon, competing zones of influence, resource disputes, regulatory gaps, or, and this is the optimistic angle, can we treat the moon as neutral testing ground, a place to rehearse cooperation at a planetary level, where protocols for conflict resolution, shared infrastructure, and peaceful operations are stress tested before we go further out? Think of it like this. If we can figure out how to play nice on a rock that's only 3 days away, what makes us think we will manage it on Mars, let alone anywhere else? The moon is our sandbox, but it's also a mirror. It reflects back the kind of civilization we are exporting into space, and maybe, just maybe, we still have time to write a better script. So let's talk about a concept I really believe in, ethical prototyping. When engineers prototype a new system, say a lunar habitat or robotic assistance, they typically test for performance. Will it function? Will it survive? Will it scale? But if we expanded that idea and test the systems for fairness, adaptability, or long-term resilience, the moon gives us a chance to do that. It's far enough away to simulate isolation, latency, and resource scarcity, but close enough to maintain support and oversight. It's a perfect setting to ask, what happens to social cohesion under stress? How do humans interact with autonomous systems in extreme environments? What governance models breaks and which ones bend? Think of this like a flight simulator, but for civilization. And this is key. We are not just testing machines, we are testing systems. That includes humans, software, governance, protocols, values, all of it. Ethical prototyping means asking what values are we encoding into the architecture, not just the physical structure, but the decision-making logic, the social hierarchies, the embedded assumptions. Because once these systems scale to Mars or beyond, it becomes a lot harder to tweak them. If we are going to stress test anything, let's start with the values we are building into the tech. Here's something we don't talk about enough. Speed can be a liability. There's a lot of pressure from governments, investors, even public imagination to move fast in space, to get there first, to plant the flag, to claim resources. But if we are not careful, that speed can lock in bad decisions. It can entrench hierarchical structures, short-term thinking, or extractive models before we've had a chance to ask, is this what we actually want out there? That's why I'm a big fan of what I call slow design for fast futures. The idea that before we rush to scale systems on the moon, we pause, we prototype, we reflect. The moon gives us that pause. It's close enough to act as a proving ground, but far enough to simulate the isolation and risk of deeper space. So let's design with foresight, not just efficiency. Let's build systems that adapt, not just perform. If we can resist the urge to replicate the flaws of Earth, the bureaucracies, the exploitations, the inequities, we might just give ourselves the space to do something better, because what we embed now will echo through every future settlement. And once we export a system into space, it becomes exponentially harder to undo. So let's bring it full circle. The moon isn't just a launch pad, it's a mirror. It reflects back the kind of civilization we are exporting into space. The way we design governance, the role we give to AI, the values we build into our infrastructure, all of that is a test, not of our tech, but of our intentions. The moon gives us something we rarely get in history, a clean slate, a controlled environment, a second chance. It's close enough to experiment safely, but far enough to teach us things we can't learn down here. And if you treat it not just as terrain, but as systems-level sandbox, we can stress test our assumptions, challenge our defaults, and build with intention. Because what we do on the moon won't stay on the moon. It sets the blueprint for Mars, for the outer planets, for what comes after. So let's not just aim to arrive, let's aim to arrive prepared ethically, culturally, systemically. The question isn't, can we build a base on the moon? The question is, what kind of society do we want that base to represent? Let's get it right up there so we don't get it tragically wrong out there. Thank you for taking this journey with me. The moon isn't just a destination. It's a question about who we are when no one's watching, about what kind of systems we choose to build when we start from scratch. We don't get many blank canvases in history. The moon gives us that rare chance, not just to expand our reach, but to evolve our thinking. So let's treat it as more than real estate. Let's treat it as rehearsal space for better futures. The decisions we make up there will shape the blueprint of interplanetary life. Let's build a future we won't regret. Thank you.
Thank you, Lars, for an interesting presentation there. We have time. Yes, please.
If I mind, I think you're on a very, very important topic. I think that some of the interest in space development is that it's a replacement for war, that it has enabled countries to say, I've got a bigger technical capability.
Absolutely,
I don't
I
have to
agree.
prove it by having a bigger bomb. I can do something that you haven't been able to do. I think we're seeing many, many examples of that. There is an agreement that there's going to be no weapons in space. I don't know what's happening with that. There is already competition, for example, the satellites, which help us with navigation, interfere with astronomy. So I think that all of these ethical considerations are extremely important.
I agree, absolutely. I see the same issues with, you mentioned it, weapons in space, the GPS satellites from various nations. I mean, all the companies and nations who are building their own rockets, their own space stations. It's a huge competition out there. And think about all the money we are just blowing up there instead of cooperating.
The money is not spent into space. The money is spent on salaries on Earth. Money is not thrown into space.
Money doesn't have much
It is
sense.
occupations. There was some argument, for example, in the United States, that some of the space facilities were built in states that didn't have a whole lot of technological advances, and that they were purposely built there to provide that. But all of the money that is spent on space research is spent on Earth. It makes jobs for people. Even the janitors in the space program get supported by the space program.
Absolutely, yes.
Abdulaziz?
Yes. Actually, you are asking very important questions. The thing is that, are we going to take our baggage with us? Okay. At the end of the day, we are humans, okay, and we have certain limitations. Okay, we used to see what's the moon and above the moon is different than what we have on Earth until now. For example, okay, there are certain parts in our psyche that still resists any change. Okay, but the question is how we are going to deal with this package that we have in this new environment. The moon is not going just to be an analog mission. Okay, you can do it as an analog mission. That's interesting, and people are doing it on Earth, but it should be beyond, because we have to break away with the limits that we have. Okay, the conscious, subconscious elements that we have are somehow earthbound, if I may put it this way. But in space, okay, until now we don't know. Okay, so the question is, it's not like building a biosphere and sitting in it. Okay, but even when we build a biosphere, we are going to sit in it. It's going to be on Earth. okay, with the same physical condition. Maybe you are limiting one thing or another thing. But on the moon, the basic thing is that, like the speakers before, let's put it this way, gravity is different. There is radiation, okay? There is a lot of things, okay? These things are affecting us, okay? On Earth, we don't have that, okay? So how do we are going? So one of the things is that we have to open our minds, and the question will be raised: are we able, as humans, okay, Homo sapiens, okay, or not? So that's the question. And thank you.
So that's a very good comment. I fully support what you said. And we will see how this will work out in the future. And my argument is that, well, we can prevent some similar things happening on the moon as happened on Earth. Like, well, what I mentioned is like the bias we have in AI systems, which leads to policing in the wrong neighborhood or in black neighborhoods and stuff like that. And if we are aware of all this, so we can design it, make it better for missions to the moon. And just as a small example, and then that's what I mentioned with ethical prototyping. So to take a step back and look at it from another angle, see what went wrong here on Earth, and then just design it better and test it on the moon, see if it works.
One last thing. Okay, I have written a small paper about the same questions that you are asking. Okay, but from a different point of view. Okay.
I'm sorry. We need to go on to the next speaker now. So
okay, sorry.
I need to cut there.
Thank you.
So sorry, Stuart, as well.
Thank you.